Evening all. Hope everyone had a good day. A while back, well, what are we now? End of July, so 5 months or so in February, I attended the Australian Physio Association's Level 3 Sports Week and a bunch of different lecturers on numerous topics, and I thought over the next few weeks I'd just present a few key thoughts from some of the most interesting topics and hopefully stimulates a bit of discussion, see how we go. The first one was Ebony Rio and Jill Cook presenting on tendinopathy. This is something I've posted about a lot over time, and I even hosted Ebony here in Auckland for a weekend course, which was a big success, unfortunately for those of you that missed it. But a few key points that came out of the thing, first off was that if you understand load, then you can understand tendons. And when you're trying to establish what's wrong with a person, a couple of key questions are, whereabouts is your pain and what type of load aggravates it. And if it's not aggravated by load, or if you can't manipulate the pain with load, then it's probably not a tendon problem and you should move on to something else. Another thing that I spoke to Ebony about at the time was, what happens if you have someone who's, say, an Achilles tendon and it's gotten really, really thick and it gets bigger and whatnot. Like, is that a bad sign? Taking up extra space, or the body's going into overdrive? Is there a massive problem that we should look at? And her and Jill were actually quite positive about this. They basically said the more tendon you've got, the more you've got to distribute load and the less likely to break, so it's a good sign. Another thing that came out of the talk related to imaging. If, for example, someone has acute pain in an Achilles tendon or a patella tendon or whatever, should you scan to see if you've got a partial rupture, which could maybe lead to a full rupture if you keep going out there? And the direction around that was that there's no concrete evidence to be able to pick which partial ruptures go on to full ruptures. There's often no warning signs on imaging before someone ruptures their tendon fully, so it's not really a useful tool. I would probably preface that by saying, depending on the individual and their history of injury and all those kind of things, I personally would like to know if someone had a partial rupture, and possibly it would guide, even if they were functional very quickly in an elite sport environment, Kevin Durant being the most famous example recently, possibly knowing that there's a partial tear in that tendon, it might guide you to be more conservative with the management. I talked about using the Royal Australian Ballet's standard amount of calf raises as a benchmark for strength, which is 35 single leg bodyweight calf raises. One thing that really jumped out to me throughout was that someone who has knee pain right around their patella tendon and affected by load and all those kind of things, that you might be thinking patella tendinopathy. But if the pain moves or is inconsistent, then it's probably not a tendon problem. Tendons are consistent in their response to load. That was the big sort of takeaway there. And related to patella tendons particularly, they happen in jumpers, and it made me think that effectively jumping itself, whether it's for basketball, volleyball, long jump, high jump, whatever, jumping is kind of an early specialisation sport. I think you need to learn to jump well so that if you end up being good at it, you can tolerate a lot of jumping because you're mechanically efficient at it. And probably the final takeaway from the talk was that they felt modalities such as shockwave and things could be useful, but your best gold standard management is load management. All those other things are doing is irritating the tendon. Again, in my experience with rugby league players, I've actually found shockwave useful because it's allowed us to settle the pain quickly to then manage the load at a higher level than possibly we could because of pain. So I think there's a useful place for it, but I think you need to judge every case on its merits. But yeah, there were a few key points that came out of the talk, and hope you found it useful.